And here we are live, everyone. Welcome to the spoiler room. Venturing down the stairs, pulling up a chair, and grabbing your favorite drink as we put a nightcap on our night of the Night Ofs here on the spoiler room. It's been a fun and interesting month, and I've had these two wonderful crew members with me all month to discuss all of our Night of the Night of episodes, and we decided to go way back to 1955 for today's film because this film, full spoiler already, I really enjoy this movie, and I am very happy that I have two wonderful folks joining me tonight to talk about it. First off, in the spoiler room, she is back with us once again from Horror Retrospective. It is none other than Kara. Hello, Kara.
Hello.
So glad you could join us to talk about this classic, having the retrospective expert with us. And Ian Simmons is also with us tonight, my right-hand man, the guy who keeps just coming back for more. He forgot his safe word, I think is what it is. So, he just...
My safe word is Mitchum, strangely enough. No.
Well, that's definitely different. Okay, so... But yes, how you doing, Mr. Simmons?
I'm doing well.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So tonight, yes, we are talking about a classic film starring Robert Mitchum and Shelley Winters, directed, the only movie directed by none other than the actor Charles Laughton. And Mr. Ian Simmons, could you give us the synopsis of The Night of the Hunter?
Well, Robert Mitchum, there I said the safe word again.
You did.
He plays a quote-unquote preacher, a guy who presents himself as a preacher, as a man of God, and he's certainly talking to somebody in these little monologues. But he kind of travels, I guess, the heartland of America back in the... This is I think post-Depression. This is not exactly period to 1955.
It's during the Depression, actually, I believe.
Okay.
It is. It's during the Great Depression.
Because they make some references to depression and the extreme poverty, but I wasn't quite sure. They never put a year on it, so I wasn't sure how contemporary they're trying to get, or if they're just doing a straight-up period piece, which is weird to think there was a period piece from 25 years earlier. But no, he travels around and finds women who are, widows or otherwise, kind of single, and preferably have money, and he kills them and takes the cash and moves on. And he comes across, he gets sent to prison for, I think, a stolen car.
Yes,
and he ends up
of all things, a
Yes.
stolen car.
Wasn't that how they got? Was it Ted Bundy? I think he got pulled over.
So, yeah.
Parking tickets or something.
Yeah. So he ends up in prison with Peter Graves.
Yes.
Who is a guy. He's a father who robbed a bank, and in the process of that crime, killed two people. He stashed $10,000 somewhere on his family farm before getting sent up the river, and he ends up in a cell with Harry Powell, Robert Mitchum's character.
Sorry.
Peter Graves. Sorry.
Oh no, I hiccuped. I was saying sorry.
Oh, okay. Peter Graves' character ends up being hanged, and Robert Mitchum's character gets out and immediately heads to the homestead to weasel his way into the lives of his family so he could find out where the money is. And he ends up encountering John and Pearl, two adorable little kids who have been orphaned, and they know where the money is, and they're not talking. But he has ways of making them talk, sort of. And it's this weird noir-ish kind of movie that ends up being Home Alone, and then an upbeat, preachy spiritual at the end. We talked a little bit in the pre-show about Videodrome, and this is another film that I watched a long time ago and I loved, but watching it again today, I'm like, what the hell is this movie?
Wow. Okay. Well, this is going to be
very psychotic.
This will be a very interesting discussion. It is a psychotic film. It's what I love too is the period that this was made in 1955. I mean, this is one of those films. I was talking about this earlier with Dan Davies, the writer and star of Ed Gein the musical. But we were talking about Ed Gein and how in 50, it was at 57 or whatever when his crimes came out. No one pictures the 50s as like dark like this. Characters like this. You think of Hugh Beaumont and Barbara Billingsley and all that type of happy suburbanites type of characters that you're used to seeing, and then you end up forgetting there's films like this out there that are dark and twisted and a little psychotic. Kara, how do you feel about Night of the Hunter before we dive deep into it?
I really enjoyed it. I definitely picked up a lot more things that I didn't notice the first time I watched it, which was probably back in 2015. So definitely seeing it with new eyes. But I don't know if I'm the only one that thinks this, but I get the impression that Cape Fear borrowed heavily from this one.
It does have a number of Cape Fear beats, absolutely. I was trying to figure out what film it felt similar to, and now that you mentioned it, it does have definitely has that feeling of it. I wonder if they borrowed from it as well, because I mean, first we have Robert Mitchum as a man of faith, doing horrible things in the name of the Lord. He's a misogynistic murderer. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I don't mean to keep interrupting.
No, go ahead. By all means, interrupt me.
What blows me away is his whole process. Like, okay, he's this charlatan. He's very charismatic. He swoops into this community and everybody loves him. And then he likens himself to this widow. She thinks that he's the answer because everyone keeps telling her that, well, her children need a father, and he just weasels his way right in, and he's just manipulating this poor woman, even just like from that wedding night, I listen here, woman, I'm not going to have my way with you. This is the Lord's house. You have your 2 children. We're not making any more. And he just puts her down and makes her feel so bad. You can see it on her face.
Well, yeah, and she thinks that there's something wrong with her, and she ends up closing out that scene with a brief prayer to God to make her the kind of person that the preacher wants in his life.
Like,
and I
think wants to be who she thinks he is, not who he actually is.
Right, and I think that I misremembered a lot of this movie. I remember it being more consistently dark than it was. And I think if the film had been more about this kind of a dynamic, I would have been happy with it. This is not the kind of film that needs a happy ending at all. And it just takes a bunch of really weird turns, and I feel like it's almost like a compromised kind of a movie, almost like Nightmare Alley from that was the 40s, I think. And there was a lot of stuff from the book, which is a really dark, kind of twisted, bleak novel that they couldn't translate to the screen because of the culture and the sort of the filmmaking regulations at the time. I feel like this is another kind of a compromised movie. I haven't read the book that it's based on, but I'm kind of curious now too, actually.
Yeah, I was curious about it too, because watching it again, it's been a while since I've watched this film. I still really enjoyed it. I forgot how much of the film, you're right about the dynamic. I forgot how short actually the dynamic between Preacher and Shelley Winter's character is, Willa Harper, in this film. I had remembered them going on a lot longer than they did the last time I watched it. I was like, oh crap, she's dead. She's dead fairly early in this film.
Very whirlwind.
It is a whirlwind. But at the same time, for when we do get Shelley Winters, I'm wondering, even though this was made in 55, I wonder if they were still trying to make a statement, not just about 30s dynamics between husband and wife, but even the current times when it was made, of the pardon my term, but the woman's place in the relationship. It almost felt like they were making a statement of how the negative impact, because Harper, I mean, her husband is not even taken off the noose, and she's already got her ice cream friend Icy telling her, you need a man.
Yeah.
Right, but I mean, we are looking at this in horror in 2022,
Yeah,
but I mean, you have to consider that this was, I'm not making any kind of a judgment saying this is the right, that things should have been this way, but things were that way.
right.
You know, it's just the way things were, and we can look back. It's kind of like the way we look back on slavery now. What were people thinking? Well, the thing is, a lot of people were thinking that way. So I don't even know if there was any kind of a meta commentary on, oh, isn't this so wrong, because it's never really called out, it's just shown.
That's
so
true.
it
Yeah.
could be that people went to see it and be like, and
It's
she needs a man.
It's definitely a product of its time. You know, like the whole nuclear family was very important. You need the full support of the husband and wife to raise children properly. But I can kind of get that mindset. Like, I think I've run across it in other films or books where someone passes away and they're like, you cannot be alone. You need someone to help with this. So it's just, I guess, the cultural mindset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and unfortunately, it's because of that mindset that ends up breaking Willa Harper to the point of, man, you know, I love the visuals into this, and we'll get to it in a minute, but there's this, I mean, Robert Mitchum already is playing a very creepy character, and the thing is, he's not like necessarily doing Norman Bates. He's a very charismatic character, but there's just something about his character that makes your skin crawl when you see him every time. And there's this scene just before he ends up killing Willa Harper. The scene in the bedroom was like, I'm like sitting there going, wow, this is dark. I mean, she's just accepting her fate. She's cracked.
Yeah.
And
he broke her.
Yeah. I mean, we already see it, you know, in the previous scene where she's preaching in front of him, and she's like, yes, I have sinned. I invested money in makeup and furry lacy things, and I shouldn't have. And I'm like, whoa.
Well, I think that's a lot of his programming, like the part of his manipulation. So he's steering her in a direction that's convenient for him.
Right. It makes you almost wonder if he was trying to drive her maybe to kill herself so he wouldn't have to. But he does also seem to take pleasure in the killing. He thinks he's doing the Lord's work, or so he says when he kills them.
Well, I mean, he's a puzzling character, because I don't think that Harry Powell is evil. I think he's crazy.
Yeah.
And that's something that really came across. I for years I've been thinking, oh, he was such a great villain. I don't think Harry Powell is a villain, because I think in a traditional, what we've seen of like charlatans on film, is they preach one thing and practice another.
Right.
You know, the charlatans we see don't actually believe in the God. They'll spout about it, and then in private, like, whatever, these bunch of suckers. And they tend to be very lascivious. This guy, he's talking to God in the scene that we meet him. He's talking to somebody, as I mentioned. He, in a movie where he was not a believer and he was just a complete fraud, I don't think we'd get these little conversations with him. Now, whether that was due to his upbringing, I don't know if that's fleshed out in the book or what. But the other thing is, you know, he is completely uninterested in sex with his new bride, which is the polar opposite of what we usually see from these kinds of movies. It's usually a scam to get women, you know, through religion. And at the end, when he gets, you know, jumping ahead to spoilers, when he gets shot at by Mrs. Cooper, he goes off in a complete psychotic episode, like screaming like a chicken and flopping across the farm into the barn like a wounded animal. I mean, like, this guy is not right.
I agree. He's definitely mentally ill. I don't know if you'd go as far as saying that he's on some sort of a spectrum, but there's definitely something going on there. I mean, obviously he's not that introspective where he's just having soliloquies by himself. I think he's actually just either talking to some other version of himself. Like, I don't know if maybe he has kind of like a split or like a second self.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but it might be a second self, or he's talking to his conscience, of sorts, or justifying his. That's how he justifies his actions. Is he's created this, you know, because they even ask him kind of what religion does he follow. He never specifies, so it's almost like his own religion of sorts. But the way he speaks, and he's very charismatic, and especially when you're talking in the Depression, when people, that's what all people have. Some of them is faith. They don't have a dime to their name, but they've got their faith, and he preys on that. And I think that's what you're right. He's not exactly evil. And I read up on a trivia. I guess they wanted to portray him even more evil. I think he's more evil in the book, but they said it was going to affect Robert Mitchum's career if he plays too evil of a character. So
I think it's more safe to say he's very self-justifying. I don't necessarily see him as evil. Like, he definitely has his own agenda, and he's whatever means to an end.
Right.
Well, but I mean, here's the thing: it is an objectively evil agenda being perpetrated by someone who just might not know better as we think of it, because his agenda is to go from place to place, swindle people, probably kill them and take their money and move on. There's nothing good in that.
No, he's definitely a predator for sure.
Yeah. I think that's a much better term.
Yeah.
Predator. I like that.
He is a predator. Hunter. That's why they call it Night of the Hunter. He is someone who he tracks people down. He hunts them. He takes his time. He plays the long game, especially here with the Harpers. Though then again, we're talking Great Depression and $10,000. That's some money.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like why I leaned toward. It's very psychopathic what he does, the way he just kind of gets in there and just wiggles under the skin, and you just kind of don't see him coming.
Well, it's also, you wonder, this idea of being a hunter or a predator, you don't get the sense that he wants this money for anything, he's still just traveling from place to place. I guess I don't know if he just squanders it on getting from place to place or what, but it's not like he makes a reference to building a giant tabernacle when he's in prison with Peter Graves, but you get the feeling that that's just the swindle he's trying to get the guy on his side, like, oh, imagine what we could do for the people if we could just get this money, hint hint.
Yeah. But, and he's not, I love how Harper's just like, yeah, no, buddy, I'm not.
When Peter Graves wakes up, he punches dude right in the face, hanging upside down in a bunk. That was amazing.
He's a very interesting character, and I think that's the appeal in this film, is trying to figure out Mitchum's character. Because there's many different aspects you could look at it, and no one's saying any of them is really a wrong take, because there's evidence of all of them. I mean, the gaslighting and the manipulation, unfortunately, of the mom, who Shelley Winters plays that great. I mean, you just feel for her. You're like, no, don't. You're better on your own. You're doing just fine. You don't need.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's the sad part of it, is she is too good for him. And he's a very complex character, so it's kind of interesting the way he just kind of, I know I kind of keep weaving back and forth between the same thing, but like he kind of confuses and manipulates her, and like codependency.
Yeah, and it's, again, I think if this movie had a bit more focus, and I'm asking for something, a film that's like 70 years old, in a time when they weren't really thinking about these things in terms of storytelling. But if you were to, and I think they remade this movie maybe once or twice, because there's a few different entries of it on IMDb, or at least there are movies with Night of the Hunter as the title.
Yeah.
But I would have liked to have seen her relationship with her husband, with Peter Graves' character, before any of this happened, because we only meet her after the husband's already dead, and then Mitchum's character comes into the picture. We don't know what kind of a person she was beforehand, if she was in a sort of codependent relationship with him and this is a pattern, or if it was just her grief and desperation that kind of, and the fatigue that comes with losing, with having to suddenly be the, breadwinner and the provider of everything, that kind of weakened her natural defenses against this guy who came in promising her the moon. We could do an entire movie about that dynamic leading up to her death, and it would have been satisfying.
I think it actually would have made the latter half of the film darker if we did see a bit of the life before. Like, for all we know, maybe she was just very well adjusted and very fine, and then this guy just comes and steamrolls over everything.
Right. It's very quick.
Well, and what's funny is the reaction we see her. She didn't seem that surprised that hubby was getting pulled away in cuffs either. So it makes you wonder what the dynamic. I mean, she seemed concerned for her kids, but it was like, oh, look, the cops have come to get my husband.
I don't know. Maybe he had a history of petty thefts. Like, oh, here we go again.
Yeah, he might have. It's hard to say, but and what I thought was interesting is the hangings that we have in here. Spoiler, folks. Later on, when we have our main antagonist, yes, he's eventually caught. But before that, I thought both Ben Harper and Harry Powell's hangings were interesting because they never happen on screen.
Yeah, with Harper's, there's a description of, he was kicking a bit, but it was nothing out of the ordinary.
Right. And the warden, or the guy in charge of it, actually seemed down about the fact of what happened to him in a way.
Right. And you get the feeling it's because in that time, what he did was, it was an act of desperation. And almost, it probably came out during the trial too, like his motivation for doing it, because he had said that, and this is why I think no one was really surprised when he got taken away by the cops. You get the feeling that he was out, like, going across the country, or out, like, kind of maybe trying to do, like, day labor work or find gigs, because when he's in jail, he's saying, I'm tired of walking around from place to place and seeing starving children everywhere. Everyone's broke and there's no hope. And so I tried to do this thing for my family, and unfortunately people got killed. So it was a crime, but it was a crime of desperation. Whereas Harry Powell is, strictly a crime of, predation.
Very, very premeditated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other one seemed more like emotional thinking, distraught.
Yeah, I mean, in better times, this guy would not be out knocking over banks.
No, it's the Great Depression. It pushed a lot of people to the brink, and we actually see bits of that later on, because after the mom dies, in this wonderful scene, folks, the cinematography in this film is just, I love the visuals in this movie quite a bit. There's this, it sounds bad, okay? I'm sure you'll judge me. You can judge me. That's fine. I feel the judgy. But there's this wonderful scene for 1955 of Shelley Winter's character wrapped in ropes in the car underwater. And it's shot good for today. I mean, that's a dummy that they used in there. That's not actually Shelley Winters, though apparently Robert Mitchum at one point didn't care for Shelley Winters and said he wished the director had used her instead of the dummy.
I agree on the cinematography. You reminded me of an early scene of her where I think it was the picnic and she's walking out, and I just like the way the shot's angled to where you kind of see her on one end and then you see what's going on in the background. And I thought that was very well done.
Yeah, there's a lot of creative shots in here. Oh, go ahead, Ian.
No, that was one of the things that stuck with me from the first time I saw it. I might have seen this in high school even, geez. But yeah, that really creepy scene of her underwater, and you got like the seaweed and everything flowing almost like tendrils of hair, and that was the first thing I thought of when it really struck me when I saw this is from the 1950s. I was still very much in the kind of Leave It to Beaver, everything's kind of square mode, but it still holds up today. It's really shocking, just eerie. Like, I would not want to watch this at 2 a.m. with all the lights out. Not that scene.
No, and there's a lot of eerie scenes. I mean, the scene we talk about just before he murders her, which again happens off screen, but we see up to him pulling out his trusty switchblade, which he carries with him everywhere. It is a noir film. I mean, you've got this angled peaked roof because their bedroom's at the roof, and there's a lot of black, and so there's a lot of black and negative space around just where they're at. And then like just before she gets killed and she just accepts her fate, they've got the light on her, but everywhere else around her is dark, kind of almost angelic. And it's like so many shots like that in here are just, I love it. And I'm a big visual guy. Maybe that's why the film appeals to me so much. I really dig the creative shots they do, especially as the film goes on, where you get the silhouettes of him later on when the kids are on the run. And apparently the silhouette of him on a horse was actually a dwarf on a horse, a little person
really
on a horse, because they did it all on sound stages. They were going to go, Mitchum said, hey, we should shoot this in the actual Appalachians. They're like, yeah, we're on a tight budget, so we're going to do it all on sound stages so we can do these creative shots that they do. And that's one of them, to where the kids are looking off in the distance and they find him still pursuing them. And yeah, it's actually a little person on a horse.
Well, it's like on Ridley Scott's Alien, the famous scene where the astronauts are going up to the derelict ship and kind of crawling through those portholes. Those are children in those costumes.
The joys of force perspective.
Yeah, I liked the movie visually a lot, but something that drove me crazy this time was the editing. There's a scene where Shelley Winter's character, Willa.
Willa.
Yeah, Willa. The scene where she's completely flipped out and is spouting off about like makeup and the evils of her wanting to have something for herself, and it's just
something lacy and
right. We do a hard cut from the audience who's watching that and completely eating it up to the image of the piles of money and the doll.
Yeah.
And the money is like $100 bills, $10 bills, and I'm like, how fucking rich is this town? But I had to go back and rewind because it wasn't a hard. I thought it was more like a collection plate kind of scene,
right.
Like they're getting into it and throwing money. But no, it's just, this is the first time we establish really, like, I think where the money is
right
hidden, right?
Yeah, it's the way it's cut. It's actually money on the ground where the
well, and you see the doll in there.
Yeah.
I just thought that the doll was like, the doll was like on the ground where they happen to be throwing this cash, but no, it turns out they're stuffing the money in. And also the giant piles of cash, that especially when they're caught and they're trying to collect it all up, I'm like, that did not all fit in that doll's dress. No.
She's an experienced doll.
Whoa, well, hey.
Not a whole lot of stuffing in that doll.
Right. I know I'm nitpicking and it's going to drive some people crazy, but again, I'm watching this movie and like, there's just two things in succession that don't make visual sense that rip me right out of the story.
Well, you do get the editing does, I mean, again, this is 1955, folks. We know they're working with film and they've got editing. They can only do so much, especially for a film like this that went over budget because Mr. Robert Mitchum was on drugs and alcohol and was very difficult to work with. Go figure.
You'd never know it watching the Harry Powell character.
Yeah, right. He did look like he had a few snootfuls. When you got Dean going, yeah, man, no cut, I'm done. But and I just lost my thought thinking of a drunk Robert Mitchum now.
Editing. We're talking about editing.
Yes, there's a scene later on after they capture, because I do want to get to the orphan lady because she's awesome. When after our man gets caught and there's a trial, the young son John doesn't actually point to him as the killer, as the guy in the killer, though he still gets convicted anyway, but he doesn't get the townsfolk don't like that. And when they came out in the mob, the lynch mob, they come into the cafe where the woman has all the orphans and our two kids, and it almost seemed like they were there for the boy, like they were going to lynch the boy, but they weren't. But it was the way it was edited. It was little awkward.
The climax of this film is atrocious. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things, like, when I'm watching it now, I'm like, how did I overlook this nonsense? I had to go to Wikipedia after it was over and read the description of the end of the movie to have it make sense, because apparently little John is still traumatized. Well, let's go back further. The arrest scene where the cops get him down on the ground, and he like starts screaming and crying and throwing the doll with the money on him. He's like, I don't want it, here, take it, or whatever. Like, he's feeling sorry for the preacher character or something, some kind of an empathy.
No, what it is so, folks, to rewind a bit, the kids have traveled downriver on the run from Hunter, and they've really hit some dire straits, but they end up crossing paths with a woman who's taking in Depression era kids who have either have no parents or whatever. She's a wonderful person. I love this character quite a bit. She's just awesome. So anyway, the Hunter, go figure, he's traveled downriver enough, he tracks them down, and they go through this whole scene, and he gets caught. And John, he has the money and the doll, and he starts slapping the back of the preacher, who's now tied in cuffs on the ground, saying, take it, I don't want it. At first I was like, well, this is weird, but then I realized it's not explained, and it could have been done a little better for a couple other scenes setting up to it. But I think even up to that point, I think John was holding out that his mom was still alive. She had run away, or he had kidnapped her. I don't think he had come to terms with the fact that she was actually dead, because he doesn't freak out until the cops say, you're wanted for the murder of Willa Harper. And John's demeanor suddenly changes, and that's where he rips the doll and just slaps the preacher with it. So even though you don't get a scenes or any dialogue really to set it up beforehand, I think what they were going for with it, the way I took it, was it finally hit reality that his mom was actually dead. I think he was holding on to some point that she had either run away, or had run away from the preacher, or so she was living in some way, shape, or form in his mind. And when the cop says, you're wanted for the murder of Willa, that's when he snaps, and he goes after the preacher with the money and saying, here, take it.
I can buy that explanation. I don't think the film does a good job of setting this up at all, especially because the later scene in the courtroom, when he refuses to testify, he won't even look at Harry Powell.
Right.
That's why it gets really confusing towards the end, because you're right, Mark. The beat I got was the townspeople showed up. I almost got the feeling that they were angry at the kid,
right?
Which would have been almost an interesting point of view, because when Harry Powell left town to go pursue the kids, he still had everyone convinced that he was the poor sad sack whose wife left him, and he's going to take the kids out of town to like get away from all the craziness. I thought that they had shown up because they found out their beloved preacher man had been wrongly accused of all this stuff, and they were going to try and like, oh, that kid, he's been twisted by the devil. But no, that's not what they're going for either. They're mad at Harry Powell, but it's like, how did they? I don't know. But yeah, at the end, like, there's a pitchfork mob, and then Mrs. Cooper is like leading the scampy little orphans off to the bus station or whatever to get out of town. It's just all very confusing, because it happens. All of this stuff happens in the course of 5 minutes. Like, no, you need a half-hour breathing room with this stuff. I don't care about the touching Christmas with the gifts at the very end. None of that. Give me some space on this other. Yeah.
Yeah, the ending is a little bit weirder than I remember it. And reading up a little bit of the behind-the-scenes trivia, I don't have a whole lot, but reading up some of the things, it makes me wonder if it was just a budgetary thing to where they were running out of money, because they were already over budget with scenes they had to reshoot. There was one character they had to completely reshoot all his scenes. I think it was the uncle character. He was cast by someone else, and then they had James Gleason come in and redo the scenes because apparently they weren't happy. So that pushed them over budget, as well as the antics of Mr. Mitchum. So maybe it was a budgetary thing, but the ending feels rushed, because up until they catch him, it actually is moving okay, and the narrative is is playing out fairly well, and you're like, okay, and you figure there's a little bit more to the movie, and then it's like from the arrest to where we see them driving off with with our preacher gonna hang him, and this time the guy who was doing the hanging says, I'll be happy to hang him. He's like, yeah, he's like, I'm gonna hang the widow killer. It's like it's not even 10 minutes, it's like bam 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 bam, lynch mob and everything, and you're like, whoa, wait, slow down. I want to see some more of this, because I have enjoyed these characters up to this point, so I kind of want to spend just a little more time to see how this plays out, rather than wrapping it up fairly fast.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many places in this movie that you could have explored some other stuff with these characters, one of which is the uncle character you mentioned. He's completely superfluous to the entire story.
Yeah.
I mean, we see him have a relationship with John, and it's like, you ever get in trouble, you just call me, I'll come run, and that never comes to anything.
Well, he comes to him, but he's drunk because he saw
Right, but again, it had all the effect of, if he weren't in the movie, the effect would be the exact same.
Yeah.
And we keep cutting back to him like pining over his dead wife. I'm like, where is this going? I mean, the one thing that he really does is introduce us to the corpse of mom, but that could have been just anybody. It could have just been a cut to a random guy fishing out in the lake.
See, and that makes me wonder if there was either a scene that was cut, or maybe it was in the book that they didn't have either money or nothing, because I'm like, okay, the cops show up and they know who he is as far as being a preacher. Of course, that's kind of like the thieves in Home Alone. They constantly turn on the water, so that's how everybody knows him. This guy's dressed as a preacher, and there's been reports of a preacher killing people along the seaboard, so maybe that they put two and two together. But I always thought, when I saw that, especially this time, was maybe the uncle character finally went to the cops and told them about the corpse in the river, because at first he was freaking out, saying, oh, they're going to do that to me, they're going to think I did this some reason, because he's not exactly right in his mind, probably due to the devil's liquid, the devil's water, the whiskey that he primes his coffee with in the morning, which I love that. Hey, John, you want some coffee? I'm like, wow, you don't see that much in movies of offering the kid coffee, but
Yeah,
it's wake up syrup.
It's wake up syrup. Yeah.
I'm a proud father of a coffee drinking 5-year-old. So yeah, not every day. It's a special occasion thing. Yeah. He loves coffee. It's very strange.
My son, when he was in middle school, he started drinking coffee. They had coffee in like the cafe, not like for like the special. If you got like an award or something, you could go to the like a VIP room or whatever, where they had the vending machines and that, and apparently they had a coffee machine.
Because that's what you need is middle school kids hopped up on.
Oh yeah,
my God,
yeah, why not?
You mentioned Home Alone. How about that cellar scene where the kids escape and they run up the stairs and he gets his fingers caught in the door and you're like howling like a chicken again?
Yeah. Well, his howling I didn't quite get, but I thought that was an interesting scene, the basement scene. There is a little tension involved because you have Icy, the nosy neighbor. Oh my Lord, this woman! I tell you, she played by Evelyn Varden. She is the epitome of the nosy neighbor. She's like everywhere. She convinces the kids to come up from the basement, who they realize that this the preacher is bad, though they kind of had a good plan. John kind of had a good plan. It would have worked too if it wasn't for the meddling
Biddy.
Yeah, meddling Biddy. It did turn a little bit into Home Alone, where he's chasing the kids and that, and Kids in Peril is always interest. It adds tension. What got me, and I guess it entered my brain, was like, okay, they show them how they're surviving on the river, because they've been on the river for a week, because we get the Biddy and her husband reading a postcard from the preacher who says, "Oh, hey, we went on a family vacation," and they're like, "Oh, ain't that sweet?" And I'm like, "Really, really?" Like in the depression, and they went for a family. Okay, whatever. And so the kids have been stopping at random places where it looks like people are feeding hungry, abandoned kids because it's depression. But I'm like, "What are you doing for water? You've been on the boat river a week. What are you doing for water besides drinking that river water, which I can't imagine with all the frogs and
Well, I mean, it's probably fresh water. You can survive on it. Probably
That's
not.
true.
You know, and there's grass, and they talk about turtles.
They do. Yeah, I love the
wanting to eat a
conversation. He's
turtle.
like, I wouldn't know how to cook it. He's like-
I did love the this is later, but the scene with the owl swooping down and the actual attack happens off screen, but the owl eyeballing the rabbit, and then this is Mrs. Cooper saying, like, what is it? It's a hard world for little things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's some great moments. And Mrs. Cooper, I love this character. She's great. You know, I'm like, man, I want to see more of her because, yeah, she's this woman that the kids come across when they finally dock their boat, and she ends up coming across them, and she could have easily run them off her land, but they take them in. Boy, you guys stink. You need a shower or a bath, I should say.
I love how she gives the little boy a spanking for trying to run away from a bath.
Yeah, that's definitely the 50s. I was like, wow, okay. She takes no guff, but
she's tough but fair.
She is. And what I like about her character is it shows the difference between Mrs. Harper and her, because she's a single woman. She has no inkling of getting a man. She's got her kids that she's taking care of. She's devoted her time and you know, her house and everything to teaching these kids and keeping them off the streets by teaching them how to garden and provide. She does put them to work, you know, but compared to John and Pearl's mom, I think is it Pearl or is it
Pearl's a little girl, yeah.
Pearl, yeah.
John's sister, yeah.
You know, compared to the mom who everybody was convincing that, oh, you need to get a man. And here, this woman has like 4 children that aren't hers. And she's like, I'm fine by myself. You get the impression she is just fine by herself.
Well, she's also like in her early 60s. So there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, she's a tough cookie. She's done with all the BS. She just tells it like it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when the preacher shows up. His charisma does not work on Mrs. Cooper at all.
But it does work on Ruby, who's the teenage girl
that was awkward.
That was, especially at the very end during that whole like riot scene where Mrs. Cooper like goes and finds Ruby and she's like standing outside the courthouse or the jail house and like, oh god, this is like Ted Bundy all over again. Like, I wonder if he's thinking of me. But yeah, Mrs. Cooper had a great line. She said, "I'm a strong tree with branches for many birds." There's some great poetry in this movie. I'm serious. There's some wonderful writing, and it's another reason I want to read the novel.
Yeah, I don't know if those are lines that they may have taken from the book. It almost feels like it with those good lines, because the way you get the dialogue and all of a sudden you get these like nuggets of just wonderful phrases in that. And she's strong. My favorite, and it's funny because my son came up about 20 minutes into the movie and he sat down. He's 21. And we've watched horror movies and such, and I caught him up to speed, and he sat down and he actually enjoyed the film as well. A 1955 film. Yes, kids, you can enjoy. But him and I both love the scene where you get you get our preacher showing up because he's tracked him down. And he's like, "Oh, those kids are mine. I'll be happy to take them back." And Mrs. Cooper's like, "Uh-huh." And then he grabs one of the kids, and the kids run away. They run under the porch, and he runs after them. He crawls under him because he wants the doll. He saw the doll, and he's become quite obsessed with it at this point. This is where he gets like Gollum. Every time he sees the doll, he just like, you know.
Literally that scene where he pops up right
or
the end, like he's crazed. You just did a great Robert Mitchum, by the way.
Thank you. And I didn't even have that much to drink. But sorry, I couldn't resist. But
more like Robert Michelob, am I right?
Don't get me wrong. I love Robert Mitchum in his roles, but his behind the scenes shenanigans are definitely legendary. Yeah. So when he goes after it, it's probably my favorite scenes is he goes and crawls under this porch to try to get at the kids. And Mrs. Cooper goes inside. You're like, oh, she's going to call someone or whatnot. She comes out with a gun. And he's
a long shotgun.
A long shotgun. And he's under the porch. And she just like pokes him with the barrel. And the way she holds the gun, though, you're just like, she'll shoot him. You have there's no, some people, especially when you have older characters or whatnot, the way they hold the gun, they might be shaking a little. There's no trembling at all. She will pop this guy.
Oh no, she's hunted varmints, probably to feed some of those kids. And I do love the way that she carries herself. The actress, Lillian Gish.
Yeah,
I don't know if you recognize her, but she was a silent film star. She did at least 3 movies with D.W. Griffith back in the 20s, or actually earlier than that. I think Birth of a Nation was 1915. But she had kind of a sad Hollywood story. She kind of lost out to Greta Garbo, and I think one of the studio executives. This is great trivia that Amazon pops up because I rented this movie on Amazon after you told me it was available for free on like one of those other services.
Sorry,
but no, that's not your fault. But they had the trivia, and they said that one of the studio executives had referred to her as a sexless antique.
Wow.
Which was, I had to like go back and read that like 3 times. Like, well, times were different, weren't they? Jesus, but
she's one of the best parts of this film.
Well, but it's weird because if you knew her from the silent era, like you can see that she was just stunning, and you can see that face, aged and matured, and it just makes it just adds a degree of awesomeness to this role.
Yeah, I love this character. I mean, Cara, what do you think of Mrs. Cooper?
I think she was probably one of my favorite ones. Just I like the way she carried herself. She was a good, strong character. She seemed, I don't want to say ahead of her time or modern, but she definitely kind of had a beat her own drum type thing going.
Yeah, she didn't listen to the gossips in town at all. She could care less. She just focused on her kids. You get the feeling, and that was it. She's very strong in her convictions, and you weren't going to sway her.
We also get the feeling, she's seen some shit, because like the way, like when the angry mob is like coming in like at the restaurant window, she's like, "Okay, kids, time to go," and then she's like marching them like calmly across the street, right? It's like, everyone stay in line. Remember who your buddy is. We're just gonna go to the bus. Yeah,
you had the crowd yelling at him, and she's just calmly like, "Okay, kids, we're gonna go out the back door here."
I get the impression they had been drilled, or they had been told what exactly to do in a certain situation.
Yeah, I mean, but still, there are literal like torches and nooses half a block away, like the background coming up to the foreground, and then they're just it's
just
so comical.
Hurry along a little bit, hurry along. Like a mother duck and her hens, and that's the way that they were kind of shooting that, is the way they were doing that. And I mean, I overall I really enjoy this film, and she is my favorite character, and Mitchum is great in it, and does have some great visuals as well. And I mean, Cara, would you say this still holds up today fairly well?
I think it does. I think the character development is very strong. I mean, Will is a tragic character, but she plays well against Mrs. Cooper, who's very bold and strong. But something that hasn't been mentioned that I'd like to bring up really
Yeah,
quick is
go ahead.
I love the dynamic between John and Pearl. Like he's very protective older brother. Like she was trying to sing some song at the beginning of the movie, and he's like, "Don't do that." And he's like, "Why? You're too little." Or he kind of fibs about, well, mom just went to go visit. He didn't tell her that, you know, she went missing or that anything happened to her. I think he played a very good older big brother. And like how you mentioned at the end, it's kind of like maybe that was his coping mechanism, because he, you know, he kind of did. He folded at the end, but he held strong the entire time.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what the dynamic between them, because all along he's almost acting like a parent to Pearl, more so than the mom was, or the dad even. You know, and the kids. Yeah, I guess we didn't talk about the kids. My apologies, folks. We should discuss them. John and Pearl, two unique individuals. Pearl wasn't too annoying for a young child actor, and John was interesting, though. He did seem a little old for his age at times.
Well, yeah, I mean, he seemed like he had adapted to, you know, having to be the man of the house, because as we saw with Dad, who, you know, even before he got hauled off to jail, we're led to believe that he wasn't around very much, and when he was, there was probably trouble. What I liked about Pearl is, I know there's a big age difference in these characters, but again, you compare the way that this character is written in 1955 to the way Princess Leia as a child is written on the Obi-Wan TV show. You get a sense that this is a child, a child who is not, you know, above average intelligence necessarily, but just, you know, acts and speaks like a kid, as opposed to kind of like a know-it-all who's like sassy and just like goes around just like telling everybody what's what. You know, both of the kids in this movie feel like children. And that, you know, we don't get a lot of that nowadays. Everybody's like overwritten and they're just like miniature adults, which is really annoying. So it's kind of refreshing to see them. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God. But no, with John particular, I liked his interplay with Harry Powell, especially in the scenes where he felt he was getting a leg up on Harry, and then Harry kind of like turned it back on him.
Right.
John has the best smug face of any kid actor I think I've seen in a while.
Yeah, apparently he was an actor, the young actor. He got had an award, I guess, like New York Times or so. I forgot what he was actually award-winning actor. The kid was
for this role.
Not for this role, before this. And I apologize here, but if I read somewhere to where Robert Mitchum told the kid that he needed to get in touch with his character more, and the kid dropped that he was an award-winning actor. So kind of like telling him, yeah, screw you, Mitchum.
It's like, you need to get in touch with your sponsor, you old drunk.
Yeah, I want to find it real quick here. Here it is. Robert Mitchum tried explaining to Billy Chapin that he needed to better understand his character and his relationship to the preacher. Chapin, who had a reputation for brattiness, go figure, replied, "That's probably why I just won the New York Critics Circle Prize."
Jeez.
Oh, why couldn't they have like cameras back then recording all this shit?
Apparently, Charles Lawton bellowed, "Get that child away from me!" And from then on, Mitchum patiently directed the boy in their scenes together.
Wow.
It just sounds like something you would give somebody a little tap on the mouth for, like, hey.
Yeah. It's interesting. I guess it was mentioned at Billy Chapin's funeral by his sister that he, even though he's a star, I mean, he's a child star, he's in a lot of the scenes. He's like eighth billing on the title card. You know, well, probably because he was just a child actor. But
yeah.
The other impression I get for John and Pearl in this town is that even before their dad was found as a crook, I almost get the impression they didn't have a lot of friends. even though there's other kids in school, the kids sing this song, which is the song you were talking about. Told Pearl, don't sing it, about the hangman.
Yeah.
You get the impression they never had any friends because they were on the outskirts versus being in town. So they only had each other.
Yeah.
And so that's why I thought it was real interesting when they get with Mrs. Cooper's clan, group, how that kind of changes for them, because they have people there that are similar to their age, not exactly, except for the one young teenager who goes for sewing lessons.
Yeah.
But she's
selling kisses for $5.
She's sewing something, not exactly fabric, but
well, you know what? Harry Powell could have used some sewing, because how many times does he impotently puncture his own suit coat with the switchblade? Out of frustration. Like it's it's a thing that he does. He sticks his hand in his pocket with the knife, and then he pops it right out of the pocket.
Well, what? I mean, I hear that happens when you're older, but if you just take a medication, it may help so your knife doesn't pop prematurely.
That sounded like a euphemism.
I have a feeling it might have been just a little bit in this film either, too.
Yeah. I did like that when Willa goes, right before she gets completely rejected in the bedroom, she's in the bathroom, she's freshening up, she opens the door and sees Harry's coat on it. She finds the knife in there, she takes it out, and she just goes, men, and then just puts it back.
Yeah.
It is the 30s, and it's the Depression, so
it would have made sense that response if she had found like a pipe or something.
Right, but a fucking switchblade.
Oh, those silly boys and their blades.
Oh, it's so.
Oh weird. Yeah, it is weird, and no one touches knife either, though. You don't touch his knife too. He's very protective of his knife. Again, brings you back to is there mental illness rather than him just being a bad guy?
I lean towards that partially. I think it's a little bit of the two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean, and when you look at him, when he's going, if he's done this chain of events of murders with the widows and collecting their money, he doesn't exactly live extravagant, though.
Well, that's what I was saying earlier. Like, it's unclear. He seems, it's almost like a game. Like, he's got to get the money, or it's like the Joker said in Dark Knight.
Yeah.
It's like I'm like a dog chasing a car. Like, I wouldn't know what to do with it once I caught it. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's probably spending it on new coats.
That's what it is.
That's it. New coats and the hair ties, the thin ties that he gets for his preacher outfits, I guess.
Oh, and copies of Movie Star magazine for when he encounters teenage girls at the newsstand.
Yeah, that scene was just
Weird.
did not land well.
It didn't fit the profile. She wasn't older. She wasn't a widow. Like, are you being a different type of predator right now?
Well, I think he was trying to get information, right?
Right.
So he was leading her on. It is almost like he's casting a spell, because like from moment she had the attention of that other boy,
right,
who was in the alley. So I don't know if it's just because he was an older man, but I mean he was an old man, right? So yeah, it's almost like he had some kind of an otherworldly quality where he could even just not even wanting to just make people fall in love with him.
Yeah.
I would just say that goes back to charisma, like just really knowing how to read a person, how to present yourself.
Well, yeah, because here he is, older guy, but he's looking kind of dapper. That's what they would say back then. But you look, and she's someone who doesn't have a whole lot, and she's looking at this magazine she really likes. Oh, I'll buy the magazine, and you want some ice cream? Well, it's like, holy crap, I've been living on roots and turnips over at Mrs. Cooper's, and you're gonna buy me some ice cream. Those guys in the hall don't. They just want to kiss and feel me up. But you want to, get me ice cream, okay?
And then fill her up.
But the thing is, I never got that impression from him that that's why it was. It's from what you were saying, Ian. I think the only reason at all he approached her at all was because she was away towards Mrs. Cooper and getting to the kids.
Yeah,
is the only real reason. I don't think it was any other type of predatorship at all.
Well, and it's also like you said earlier, he really doesn't seem interested in women, but there's that confusing scene in the beginning where he's like at that kind of like that showgirl show, and he's like disgusting, and it's like, why are you here then?
Yeah, that's I forgot about that. That's actually the first scene where you see the switchblade thing coming out.
Right.
I don't. Is this not to get all like Freudian or whatever, but is this like a repressed gay thing or something? Because he does seem really mad about sitting in there, and then he pops out the switchblade, and he's all upset, and he has no interest in women. I'm not sure.
It made me want. Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Car.
I mean, it could just be that his blade's more responsive than he is. Some frustration type issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also, it is called Night of the Hunter. He could be hunting, thinking that maybe she would be someone that, he could prey on, kill or whatnot. It was weird that he was in there, and then at the same time, he's like, she's evil, females are wicked, and then his knife prematurely switches.
Like, it sets up the character well. Like, he has these morals and this outlook, but it still doesn't make sense. Why are you here if you're against that?
Maybe just to reaffirm his outrage. I mean, the most comfortable I think he's around of him being around anybody else is when he's in prison with Peter Graves. I think there was a cut scene where Peter Graves asked him if he liked movies about gladiators.
Uh-oh.
Oh, I see Scraps as a boy dog. Anyway.
Hey, preacher, ever seen a grown man naked?
Men holding men.
Now I want to see Peter Graves, pilot captain from Airplane, only him in the jail cell.
Night of the Cruiser.
Night of the
Boy.
Oh, yeah. But, you're right. He does seem the most comfortable in prison. Maybe there is some undertones there. Maybe it's just back to what we were originally saying about his character, is that he's justified some of his actions and taking the piety route, the purity route of not having sex or whatnot, maybe because that's a deeper seated psychological issue from something that happened to him as a young kid.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look up this book and just like buy it off Amazon. I just need to know what more about these characters.
My brain just went left field there, and I was thinking, what if he's just like an incel or something? But then again, he marries widows, so that doesn't really fit that idea.
Plus, he's a voluntary celibate.
Yeah,
that's true.
So he's just a cell.
I was gonna, he's just a cell.
And he loves prison. There you go. No,
and he loves prison.
I just meant like on the whole, like the anger, frustration, rage against women type thing. Like that kind of makes sense. But then there's this thing like, no, not really, because he has women that are willing to spend their time with him.
Well, and then let's go. Oh, great. My brain just went somewhere too, making a lake out of a puddle like I always do. What if he suffered from ED? What if he part of the reason why he chooses the celibacy is because he can't actually
that's kind of what I was implying earlier, like when you said when he was in the theater and he flipped his blade, and I was like, well, I don't know, maybe he's just
more responsive. And that could be why he was there, to see if he could get a response out of himself, and he doesn't. But like you said, his blade is more responsive before
he just gets angry.
Right, because he doesn't get turned on, or from some trauma or something, so he's angry because he doesn't have the feelings that he might feel he should towards the person.
Hmm.
Oh,
Which,
this is like a really weird idea for like a thriller. Is a guy who only gets hard when he's preaching the gospel, like he's
Oof,
an angry preacher.
okay.
No, like
That's
there's a level here at Night of the
he's
Hunter. I think we're going to explore soon. We're getting there.
we're getting there. It could be why he goes after the widows, is
hmm
that he figures they're easy prey. You're talking a hunter angle, so he's going for what he might consider the weakest, but
yeah.
also they might be the most open because they're lonely. It's not just a connect with them for the
So,
money.
so if he's
Yeah,
going after people that are weak, he's not really a hunter. He'd be more of a scavenger.
scavenger, sure.
Hmm.
Yeah, that
Well,
could be.
the other thing is like we only see two of his victims. Really, the first one, like, because he went to great lengths to strap Willa down to that car and put the car in the bottom of the lake. But the first victim we see, the opening shot or one of the establishing shots of the movie, is a barn, kids playing hide and seek, whatever, and they just find this lady. She's just
In the
like laying
cellar,
in the
yeah.
barn.
It's the
Yeah,
cellar door.
yeah. He didn't like make any attempt to like bury her or chop the body up or anything. Just like, nah, there she is, and off I go down the road.
Well, he got a nice car out of it, so
I
whatever.
guess, yeah.
See ya, Marge.
Yeah. So there you have it, folks. Night of the Hunter. Ian, was there anything that we didn't touch on that you might want to touch on?
No, I'm glad you
Okay.
brought that phrasing up after we'd
You're
moved away from the switchblade conversation.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.
But no, it falls into a category of film that unfortunately I'm seeing a lot more of, which is, and this applies to Videodrome, as I mentioned. It also applies, sadly, to John Carpenter's Halloween, of important films that were great when they came out, but for me, watching them now, I'm just like, I recognize them for what they are. I just don't think much of them.
Sure. And what about you, Kara? Your final thought here with the Night of the Hunter.
I would still recommend checking it out. I think it's still a good classic film. As you said, it has good cinematography, good acting, strong character development. It kind of falls apart in the end, but if you're willing to overlook all of that just because of the whole dynamic between the characters, I think it's worth taking a view.
It's definitely a creative film for especially the time it came out, 1955. And you're right, visuals alone, I would say watch it just to look at what they did, and you think about they're doing this with film cameras. They're doing a lot of interesting expressionism type stuff and representation. They're doing a lot of things playing with shadows and that in this film, and it looks really good. I mean, if nothing else, even in the opening shot for a 55 film, we get a aerial shot of the house where they find the body, and then we get an aerial shot out. It's actually pretty impressive that you wouldn't expect for a film like this. I think it should be watched if you're looking for early thrillers, maybe thrillers that you do see hints here and there of filmmakers who watched this and borrowed the good things from it and made better thrillers. I like it for the Robert Mitchum character. I think he's an interesting character, and Mrs. Cooper especially. But just for his character, because he's a slightly different villain than what you might think, and he might not. Is he a villain, as we've talked about tonight? Well, that's a little bit in question. Is he truly evil, or is there something else going on? So definitely a complex character. And yeah, Ian, if you do read the book, I'll be definitely interested in hearing about it, because I don't usually read because words burn. So
I'll report back later.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you, folks, for listening to us talk about this interesting classic. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. Now, as always, this is where I give my wonderful crew members the license to shill. So, Kara, shill away.
It's going to be a while before I do anything new, but as always, I have tons of reviews up on my YouTube channel, Horror Retrospective, tons of older films, mostly wacky stuff that nobody's ever heard of, or stuff that you would think, oh God, why did she watch that?
Those are the best kind, though. So awesome. So yes, check out that YouTube channel and subscribe, of course. And Mr. Ian Simmons, license to shill, it's yours.
I'm Ian Simmons. I run Kicking the Seat, which you can find at kickseat.com. I also have a YouTube channel, which you can find on YouTube under Kicking the Seat. I do movie reviews and live streams and panels and all that good stuff. And if you're watching this live, then tomorrow night, Wednesday, June 1st, we'll be back talking about Obi-Wan Kenobi on Disney+.
Already halfway through the season, only 3 episodes. Whoa!
Yeah, and we'll see. We'll see how the conversation goes, because last week was something. It was pretty epic. But yeah, and are you going to be able to join, Mark?
I probably will not be able to make that one.
Oh, okay.
Every other Wednesday is a little rough for me. So, but
it's because you're getting your Mitchum on. I understand.
I'm getting my Mitchum on. Yeah, great. Now that's a term.
That has to be a thing now.
Now we got to make a T-shirt. Get your Mitchum on. There you go.
There you go. Yes.
Available in the shop.
Flask on the front, switchblade on the back. The audience can figure that one out for themselves. But no, that's pretty much all I have to pitch. So thank you, Mark. Hey, Mark, maybe you were going to get to this, maybe not, but I wanted to bring it up. What's going on next week? The whole
yeah. Well, if you haven't checked our broadcast, we have the Hendrickson Experience. Yes, the Hendrickson Experience. Lance Hendrickson is the subject for next month, and we're covering 4 films of Lance's. The 4 films that you might not expect. No, Aliens is not in there because, of course, that's an easy go-to one. No, we've picked a film that was supposed to be the 3rd film in a franchise. We've picked an early crime thriller, and it all goes along with the horror of 1988 film for next month, which will be Pumpkinhead. Which will be interesting to see, especially after I've read some interviews with Mr. Henriksen and what he thought of the film. Ooh. So a lot of interesting stuff next month. You can check the schedules on specialmarkproductions.com. Right on the homepage there, where you can see what episodes are coming up for the month on when our live feeds are. And if you missed the live feed, that's quite all right. Check us out on iTunes and Stitcher Radio, where you get your podcasts. They usually post later in the week. I add a few other tidbits to it. Also a tidbit, just so you folks get a little teaser, we will have an interview with the writer and star of Ed Gein the Musical, posted soon, Mr. Dan Davies. I just today finished my interview with Mr. Dan Davies. It was a wonderful conversation. He's from Wisconsin as well, so we had a lot to discuss as far as Mr. Gein and a little bit of his inspiration of why someone would make that film. So yeah, check out that interview. Look for it soon as well. And now, that'll take care of it for tonight. And I will just say a good night, everyone. Because I don't think you want to hear me singing Reeling in the Sheaves, because you could, but they sing it enough in this film. So good night.
Thank you for that, Mercy, and good night.
Yeah, you don't want to hear me sing.